Welcome everybody to the American Space Museum here in our Space Shuttle Gallery in downtown Titusville, Florida. I'm Mark Marquette and we're so glad you're with us to stay curious. Our special guest today to my left behind our COVID safe barrier here is none other than former Kennedy Space Center Director Jay Honeycutt. Welcome, Jay.
Thanks, sir.
We're glad to have you here on our program called Stay Curious, and not only was he the director out at the Kennedy Space Center, he, I think maybe more importantly, was the main shuttle manager over the whole operation from launch to landing. Big responsibility, and he cut his teeth at Johnson Space Center in the SIMS world, the simulations for the Gemini and then first the Apollo era. And we're going to get into all that with Jay here in just a couple minutes, because we got a little house cleaning to do, because here on Stay Curious we have a couple things going on. And the first thing, we want to thank our friends here at Space Coast Coastal Windows and Clay Lock Coastal Windows and Tint that gave us this COVID barrier thing. Very important that we could do that to talk to our guests. And we have today, as I look at my notes here, yes, we've got a birthday today. And we know you all love birthdays, and we've got a good shuttle birthday here, Jay. This is Mike Malone.
Right.
And Mike is 75 years old today. He had 3 space shuttle flights, born in Wichita, Texas, Whiskey Falls, Wichita Falls, Texas, on September 10th, 1945, but he was raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He had 3 space flights, STS-41D, STS-27. Read up on STS-27. That was one of the most damaged shuttles to come back after a DOD mission. They lost a lot of tiles and were lucky. And STS-36 Atlantis in March 90 was his last mission. He was an Air Force colonel, a West Point graduate, and he has his own website. He's a motivational speaker. Many of you have seen him in the Facebook world, and he has published in 2006 a very popular astronaut tell-all book called Riding Rockets: The Outrageous Tales of a Space Shuttle Astronaut. So we wish Mike Malone a happy 75th birthday on this September 10th. And we love our astronaut birthdays. I also was talking with Jay Honeycutt that he had something to do with a few of these missions here that are in space. We love showing you what is up in space in today's space history. So incredibly, 25 different astronauts can say, I was in space on September 10th. And we start off with 1994, STS-64 crew here. I don't know if that's any of your, if that was yours. Richard Richards was the commander and Blaine Hammond was the pilot. And that was in 1994. Then here in 1995, and that would have been under your directorship there, Jay Honeycutt, was STS-69 with David Walker as the commander and Kenneth Cockrell as the pilot. And Janice Voss was on that too, and she passed away of cancer after 5 flights. And I always think about that. What after all the training and so forth, and passed away by cancer. In the year 2000, up in space at this time, was STS-106, and that was the first docking with the shuttle, and the Zvezda model and the American module, and Destiny. And we're coming up on the 20th anniversary, Jay, of the continuous human occupation of the space shuttle, and we're going to be talking a lot about that here at our museum. The final mission in space this date in history was in 2006, and that was the crew of STS-115, a very much a hard hat mission to the International Space Station. So we're glad to bring you those missions of what's up, because this is what the American Space Museum is all about, preserving the birth of the American space age and inspiring the next generation. And that's why we have this gentleman with us here today, Jay Honeycutt, Before I turn him loose, though, we want to remind you this Saturday is our 13th charity auction. This is, we have 300 items up, easy to look at them today at spaceauction.org, or go to americanspacemuseum.org, and the clicks up at the top will take you to see 350 items. Jay, we have a rosary beads from Charlie Mars' first wife who passed away. Charlie Mars is a NASA manager who is our board chairman and the godfather of our museum. And Charlie has his ex-wife's rosary beads up there. The bidding is already close to $8,000.
Oh, wow.
Pete Conrad took them to the moon for him. And it's only the second, I think Buzz Aldrin took rosary beads to the moon. So things like that are on there, but there's a lot of shuttle crew autographs for those of you that collect those that you can be had $100 to $150 probably. But this is how we keep our museum open. It's become an important part of raising bushel baskets full of these $100 bills to keep your favorite nonprofit museum open. And we're ready to open up the doors. Here's September 21st. Here's our team that is going to make this happen, and that helps us with space. Our Stay Curious program. But we are going to have tours limited to 10 people at 10 o'clock, noon, and 2 o'clock. If you book the 2 o'clock show, you can come and see Marty and me do our thing here to help people stay curious. So you can call the office or email info@americanspacemuseum.org and plan your trip here to see one of the most humble but just unbelievable space museums I've ever been in. I've been involved with it 3 years here, and it's a blessing to be involved with it and meet people like Jay Honeycutt. But you'll enjoy it when you're here. It'll do more than you stay curious. You'll be embraced by some people that are really passionate about our museum. So that's all the ads I have, I think, Marty, to get out of the way. And we wanted to welcome Mr. Jay Honeycutt again. Yes?
Hey, Jay, Nicole Stott says hello.
I'm sorry?
Nicole Stott says hello.
Nicole Stott says hello to you. We say hello to you, Nicole. Thanks for watching. And I want to plan a November trip to see the Museum of Science and Industry there in Tampa and her wonderful art display that's going on.
Peggy and I have been over there.
Oh, you and your wife been over there?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Is it?
Really cool.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
There's some original artwork from Alexei Leonov and her artwork and other things there. So thank you, astronaut Nicole Stott, for being a friend of our museum. And Jay, you said that you had something you wanted to share with us, and please do that, sir.
Yeah. Well, for those on the net that haven't heard, we lost one of our heroes this week. Dave Flowers passed away. He retired as the chief financial officer out at the center. Started with Apollo.
His name again, please.
Dave Flowers.
What?
Dave
Flowers. Dave Flowers. Okay.
And we're going to miss him. He was a great supporter of the program and a great contributor to the program.
Well, rest in peace, Mr. Flowers there, and we send our condolences through Mr. Honeycutt here to your family. I wanted to point out here, Mr. Jay Honeycutt, he told me his dad's name was Mr., so that's hard for me to, I respect these guys so much. There are 8 of the 10 Space Center directors at Kennedy that Jay Honeycutt was the, what were you, the 6th in line there. We don't have Bill Parsons there or Bob Cabana. Sorry about that. I couldn't find them on the internet. I don't know where I found this. I actually had this tacked up on my bulletin board wall, kind of like my heroes out there. And little did I know that I'd be having a conversation with you one day. But of course, you can't hardly talk about your job without talking about Kurt Debus and the von Braun that took Kennedy's pledge and made it happen. What does it feel like to follow in the footsteps of his shoes?
Well, they're obviously they're major contributors to our success. We couldn't have done it without those guys. I was fortunate several years ago to receive the Von Braun trophy by the National Space Club, and it's something that I hold pretty precious.
Very nice.
They were big contributors here. They were big contributors at Marshall. They get a lot of credit, deservedly so, for the early days in the development of the Saturn. It's interesting though that everyone pretty much thinks there's two sets of people that made the program success. There was the American space guys and the German team.
Right.
But there was yet a third, and that was a group of Canadians that were that after the war were building an advanced jet fighter for the Avro Corporation up in Canada, and it got canceled at just about the time that the Space Task Group was formed at Langley by the people that eventually became the leadership of the Johnson Space Center, Bob Gilruth and Chris Kraft and Max Forget and those people. So the Avro program got canceled. So, and they had just formed the Space Task Group. So Gilruth sent a team of people up to Canada, and they interviewed these guys on like a Wednesday and told them to come back on Thursday, and they let them know how they made out, and they came back on Thursday and said, you need to be in Langley, Virginia on Monday because you're going to work for NASA. So they hired about 30 people out of that
Canadian group
that became the core technical competence of the Johnson Space Center for Mercury and the Gemini programs. There's a really interesting book written by actually the guy that is the editor of the Quest magazine.
Yes.
It's called Arrows to the Moon, and it's the story of these Canadian guys.
It's called
Quest. It's called Arrows to the Moon because their airplane was the Arrow, was its
Arrows to the Moon. Yeah, okay.
And it's an interesting story. They brought in the capability to do things that weren't inherent in the government team that was starting out to follow.
Great story. That helps me stay curious for sure. That's so 3 nations involved in our American space program. The Germans that came over in Operation Paperclip at the end of the war.
They were equal contributors.
Wow. Okay.
To the Germans and to the American team.
Well, that's I'm going to look into that book. You were also honored with the Von Braun Award. As you said, but the Gilruth Award is a very prestigious award that's given out. And this gentleman also was presented the Presidential Medal of Freedom for what he did during the Apollo 13 emergency in there.
Yeah, well, that was presented to the entire flight control team in Houston. So,
which you were a part of, and to jump forward there, so we don't have to backtrack. Were you involved with the team and Ken Mattingly and the command module trying to get the minimum amount of power and everything?
Yeah.
What was that like? Now, Marty Winkle, I haven't given a shout out to my co-producer and cameraman, Marty Winkle, who worked for Grumman on the lunar modules here at Kennedy Space Center. I always like telling people he sat on every engine hatch of that ascent stage out there, and unfortunately COVID pandemic put a kibosh on the 50th anniversary plans for the Apollo 13, and that Marty's very involved in with his Grumman friends here. So reflect back on that a little bit 50 years ago, Jay.
Well, what I did in that time frame was there was a mission simulation team in Houston who had the responsibility for conducting all the practice missions, if you will. Put the crews were in their simulators down here, in the command module simulator, the lunar module simulator, and then the flight control team was at their consoles in the mission control center in Houston, and we basically did practice missions, putting in little problems that caused the ground and the crew to work together. There was a bunch of A personalities in the flight crew group, and there were some A personalities in the flight control team as well. And so our job was to build a team out of those two, so that the people in the air had trust in the people on the ground to tell them that whatever they told them was going to be the right thing to do, and people on the ground had faith that the crew was going to basically listen to them. And so that was our job, was to build an integrated team. It wasn't a gotcha environment. We didn't go around. There always was a way out of every problem that we put in, and then our job was just to help them work through that. So when Apollo 13 happened, they took flight. There was about 4 or 5 flight control teams at that time. So they took a couple of those and put them on console in real time with the crew in the mission environment, and then they took the other 2 teams working 2 shifts to come up with things to try practice in the simulators to make sure they worked, and then so they could be passed up to the crew during the mission. And I was part of that group that was working on the things to figure out what are we going to do, where the simulators were involved.
Well, a very important part of manned spaceflight, in reading your NASA biography and some other, your oral history and so forth, you say in there that part of the fun of being with manned spaceflight was you had to solve the problem now.
Right.
You couldn't put things in a safe mode and then scratch your heads and go back to that.
Yeah.
This was, and none other was this displayed, of course, than with the Apollo 13.
Well, yeah, but that's the beauty of working operations. You have to be able to recognize and react in real time, and do what you got to do to make sure that everything works all right. So.
And building that confidence, because this was these pilots and commanders of the space ships, the Gemini and of course the Apollo, they weren't used to people telling them how to fly or solving their problems. So this was he's very humble. This was one of your linchpins back then, was building this relationship.
The flight crew in those days were mostly single-seat fighter pilots. So they were accustomed to taking care of whatever might happen while they were in the air. So our job was to convince them that the people on the ground were a big pyramid. There's a group of people that you see in the Mission Control Center when the camera goes on them, and that little console is about maybe 50 or 75 people in there. But each one of those console positions had a group of people in a room half the size of this, right across the hall from the control center. And then there was another group of people that Don Arabian had just passed away recently.
Yes. I got privileged to meet Mad Don Arabian.
Yeah, the mission evaluation room, which was over in the building next door, in which they had several hundred people from the engineering directorate, and those guys were all in contact back to Bethpage, to the Grumman people, and down to Downey, to the Rockwell people, so and back to the subcontractors, whoever they might be. So there were probably 1,000 people on the ground in real time supporting those 3 guys in the spacecraft. And so to get all that to work together, you had to practice it, and that's basically what our job was to practice in a real-time environment, just as in the missions. Oftentimes they told us it was a lot easier to fly the flight than it was
through the simulations. Well, and this is back in the 1960s, okay, in an era when you heard about your neighbor getting a color TV, okay, because yours was black and white. And I mention that because you were literally playing with the greatest computer games of the time. It was like one big game
Oh,
that
yeah,
everybody
I mean,
plays
yeah,
now. These
yeah.
game
And,
simulations. So
The Mission
very
Control
rewarding.
Center, there were 4 computers in the first floor of the Mission Control Center, and they were IBM 360s, and they were about the length of this desk and about high as you could reach, and about this thick, and it had the computational capability of your
Yeah.
Apple iPhone. And one of those was the mission support computer, and then they had a called the dynamic standby that ran just in parallel with the mission computer, so that if it failed, they just swapped over, didn't miss a lick. Then they had a development computer, and then they had our computer, which was a sim computer. So we had we had all our math models of the spacecraft. We had the ground system, because in those days, unlike today, you didn't have the TETRA satellites, so that you had continuous coverage. You had a 10-minute pass here, and you had 5 minutes of loss of signal to the crew, and then you had another 2 or 3 minute pass. So we had all that programmed into our machine. And down here, I think the lunar module simulator had 3, and the command module had 4 big computers that ran it. And when they were running with us, the output of that went to the central instrumentation facility and came back to Houston. I counted up one time between my console in the sim area and the flight crew in the simulator, there was like 14 big computers that were all lashed together without the benefit of satellite communications that you
Wow.
have now. And interestingly enough, it all would sync up, and the delays were almost unnoticeable, and there was the crews, the delay times and all were trivial, and we gave them a pretty good representation of what the mission actually was.
Well, Jay, you started at the Redstone Arsenal, in the 60s, and now you're in Houston, and through the Apollo era with these simulators, and you're in the inner circle there with people like Chris Kraft and all the flight directors that were learning how to be flight directors under the great Chris Kraft, George Abbey, who had a big say in the crews and so forth. So what was that like? What was this? I mean, and I understand you all were so focused on going to the moon and then the return trips that you didn't have much time for the outside world, did you?
I couldn't name you 10 songs from the 60s or 10 popular TV shows or 10 popular movies. I mean, we knew there was something going on in Vietnam, but we weren't. And basically, we were working 6 10-hour days, and in the 7th day, we figured out what we were going to do next week. So it was not much time for that.
What was it like being around these that we refer to now as some of the titans of the American space
They
program?
were just guys. I mean, just like down here, the team that was down here was dealing with the George Page and Rocco Petrone and
T.J. O'Malley.
T.J. O'Malley and that group of people, and they were the same kinds of titans of the industry that we had out in Houston, and the people down here had the same relationships. There was no, I'm me and you're you kind of stuff. It's let's go do what we got to do. And we had a good relationship with the flight directors because we were training them. Each one of these flight directors, whether it was Kranz or whether it was Glenn Lunny or whether it was Jerry Griffin, who eventually was the deputy center director down here and the center director out in Houston, they were all trying to make sure their team was going to be able to execute their responsibilities during the flight. So they were supportive and cooperative in the kinds of things that we wanted to do, as long as it was value added to the process. But it was interesting what you said about starting. Joanne was on a couple of weeks ago, and she said she started as a co-op out here with ABMA. Well, I started with ABMA as well up in Huntsville, but mine was a little different because I got up to Huntsville in 1960, and NASA had been formed in '58, and they were in the process of transferring all the ABMA people in Huntsville over to the new NASA, and they left the ABMA people to the Army, because that stood for Army Ballistic Missile Agency, is what ABMA was. And so all the leadership basically left and went to NASA, and they took along all the engineers with them. So the Army woke up one day and said, we don't have any engineers. So their solution to that problem was to draft them. So I was in that group of people that got out of school and got drafted and got assigned to ABMA in Huntsville. So I spent 2 years in the Army up there as a private. But it turned out it was one of the most fortunate things in my career, because since they didn't have any engineers, work was still coming in from Washington for them to do. So I got some responsibilities at a young age that a lot of people didn't get when they went into a big company with a whole bunch of engineers, and you had to work your way through. I kind of went in, and about the third week there, the boss said, hey, we got to go figure out how to launch rockets off of helicopters, and you're the project manager on the fire control system. So, I went from what's a helicopter to what's a fire control system to bar napkin trying to
Trying to figure it out.
And figure it out. So for me, it was actually a break to get drafted and get sent up there, because I got a jump start on in the responsibility field over a lot of my peers.
Well, we're glad that you're with us on this edition of Stay Curious. We're here with Jay Honeycutt, who done a lot of amazing things. We're talking a little bit about his oral history, and we're going to go through some of that, but Jay brought with him a whole pile of photographs to share with you, so please stick around, because we got a lot of fun at the second part of our show here.
Yeah,
I don't want to slight...
the second part is some of the fun stuff we did
that's right.
While I was out here.
And I got a few stories I've heard about him that we're going to talk about, some fun stuff. But the serious stuff is that you're in Houston for Johnson Space Center. You transitioned from the Apollo program into the Shuttle program right away?
No, I went from Apollo to Skylab. I actually got an ops job in Skylab because it was a year-long mission. So I had after the training was done, I got an ops console to sit on in the
operations
for the
Skylab.
Center, for Skylab, and then we flew the Apollo Soyuz mission. So went back to
love that one with the General Stafford.
Right. Went back and did the training for that, and then I got a second shift ops responsibility on that mission, and as an interface with the Russian Control Center.
That's interesting, because in your tenure as KSC director, there was 5 or 6 missions to the shuttle by the shuttle to Mir.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a foreboding thing of what you were going to be involved in, right?
I mean, what Apollo Soyuz did several things. Probably the most important one being that it built a relationship between the Russian space people and the U.S. space people that still exists today. And we met a lot of those guys. Were a lot of things with him, a lot of difficult subjects with him, a lot of politically down the line things with him, and worked through the language barrier with him in Apollo Soyuz, and we maintained that relationship right up through Shuttle Mir, and then the building of Space Station, and still at it today with the Russians. They're
Great partners, right?
Great partners.
Yeah, people, we've needed the Russians to be our friends in space to accomplish what we've done. Isn't that right, Jay?
Absolutely.
Good, yeah. Well, you're JSC, and then my notes here say that you came to KSC as Director of Shuttle Operations 2 flights after the Challenger disaster. That put you at about STS-29, which was a DoD mission, I believe. So, what made you change from talking to some of your peers? Once you're in once you're at Marshall or Johnson Space Center or Kennedy, there wasn't much transfer, as I understand it. But you're one of the people that transferred.
Well, when
very successfully.
At that time, General McCartney was down here as the center director, and I had in one of my last jobs before Challenger, I was in the operations office in the shuttle program office, and one of my responsibilities was security, mission security. Basically ensuring that we follow the DoD rules as far as security was concerned, ensuring that we didn't inadvertently release any information because we were a civilian operation with a DoD customer, and so the cultures were different. So one of my responsibilities was to deal with the DoD team at Space Division with regard to security and how we were going to do it, because some of the things they asked for were not practical to implement, and you would communicate with them that we understand what you need, but we can't satisfy that kind of requirement. And at that point in time, General McCartney was the general running Air Force Space Division now, and so I had to spend a lot of time with him prior to that. And then when Challenger happened, I went to, when Dick Truly went up there to kind of pick up the pieces after Challenger, I went up with him, and General McCartney was in the process of transitioning from the Air Force Space Division to NASA, and he had an interim stop at headquarters. So I worked with him a little bit while I was up there with Truly. So when he came down here, I was probably the only senior guy outside of Kennedy that he had any experience with whatsoever. So he, for whatever reasons, he called and asked me if I considered coming down and doing this job, and I jumped all over and said yes, sir.
Well, what a great job you did, obviously, and as the Director of Shuttle Operations, folks, Honeycutt was responsible for the engineering management and technical direction of pre-flight, launch, landing, and recovery activities for the shuttle vehicles. That's
well, but what that was a big job.
Yes.
What
kept you up? What kept you up at night over that job?
Nothing.
Nothing?
No.
No? You're not a person to go to bed worrying about anything.
I'll tell you a little story in a minute. Don't let it ever woke me up, but I always made a habit of trying to leave the job when I went through the gate, and so I didn't really, I wasn't a wake up in the middle of the night thinking about the work kind of guy.
What areas required your most attention over this whole behemoth of the space shuttle
figuring out what I was doing was the first one, because the most people I'd ever been directly responsible for was about, I don't know, 40 or 50 when I was a branch chief, and then when I was in the program office and in the operations office. Well, I got down here, there was the organization had 1,000 people in it. It had a 8,000 person Lockheed contract and a 1,500 person orbital logistics contract, and all of a sudden I had half the people in the Center Civil Service complement and more than half the budget, and so I had to try to figure out what I was doing was, the first thing, and we were not because of the aftermath of Challenger and a lot of concern amongst the workforce over had we made any contributions to the problems and were we doing everything we could. We spent a lot of effort. Fortunately for me, I had a great team. I had Bob Seek to worry about the ops stuff. I had Bob Lang to worry about the engineering stuff, along with Horace Lambert with the Lockheed team, and John Tribe with the Rockwell team. Had a guy who gets not near enough credit for what he did. Ed Weber, who was in my office, and he kind of knew the center and where the bodies were buried and who you could get the best results from and who you had to worry a little more about. And Ed kind of walked me through the minefields and the pitfalls of being a new kid on the block, so to speak, with a fairly ingrained workforce that had been down here doing the same kinds of things that I was trying to learn. So we had it was a challenge and a lot of fun to get all those people basically pulling on the rope in the same direction and be able to project back to the program people and the headquarters people that when we tell you what we're going to do, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it with the resources that we have, and we're going to do it in the time that we tell you that we're going to get it done. So we had a lot of fun working, consolidating procedures and getting more people doing the same kinds of stuff and getting more. We sort of instituted a here's how we can, and not why we can't attitude amongst the workforce to get their mindset toward we can get this done. We just got to.
Everyone pulling together. That's some good management there, Jay. You leave the gate and you leave all the worries to your top lieutenants.
Well, we got to have good lieutenants.
I know you did. You mentioned some of them there, like John Tribe and Bob Seek, have supported our museum for 20 years, and we love them, and we're so glad to have you visiting here with us and becoming part of our museum. So you were in Director of Shuttle Ops. By your count, you told me you probably had about 38 shuttle flights.
Yeah.
You were involved with 25 in Johnson City, and maybe another 50 when you were with Lockheed Martin. So you were right at the beginning of the program and of the 135 missions. But and when you were Director of Shuttle Management, Bob Seek was your launch director.
Right. On
there, and so when you made the move up to the 4th floor, you convinced Seek to take your job, I understand.
Well, it wasn't easy. He had.
It wasn't easy.
Seek liked what he was doing, but he came in and did a great job, and then that allowed me when I got up to the 4th floor, I knew I didn't have to worry about that. I already knew that I didn't have to worry about.
Well, it's a smart move, because getting anybody else in there with less experience may have been.
And I already knew I didn't have to worry about
problem.
the payload guys, and John Conway and his team, because in those 38 or so launches that we had at Shuttle Ops, every one of them had a payload that had come through John Conway's organization.
Okay.
And was either loaded in the orbit or in the OPF or out at the pad, and never once did they not deliver their product on time. So I knew I didn't have to worry about John.
Great.
And the payload guys. I knew I didn't have to worry about Seek and those guys. So I just had to worry about two things: figuring out what the rest of the people in the center were doing, and not screwing anything up in the process of doing it. So it was pretty straightforward.
Well, you probably could have been happy there, but you become the 6th director of Kennedy Space Center, and obviously there's a little bit of politics involved in that, doing what the administrator wants you to do, I guess. So give us an idea, how did that happen? And Dan Golden was the NASA administrator at the time?
Yeah, well, Dan was the administrator. Wayne Littles was his shuttle operations guy in headquarters, and then Cripp reported in through Wayne to thing. So Cripp announced his retirement, and Wayne asked me if I'd consider.
Bob Crippen, of course, astronaut that was the center director right before you.
And I gave it some thought, and then said, of course, well, why wouldn't I do that? And it turned out to have been a great opportunity and a great move. I knew Wayne both through through him being the head of spaceflight at headquarters, and also when he was at Marshall, he was the deputy center director, and he went off to charm school at Harvard or somewhere.
Charm school.
MIT or one of those,
right.
Those management programs. And so Jack Lee, who was the director up there, asked General Carter if I could come up and be the acting center director, deputy center director at Marshall for the time when he was gone. So I did that. So I knew him, and then that allowed me to know more of the Marshall people in the management team.
That was a smart
I knew
move.
the ones in Houston basically because I had come from there, and by then I had done 2 tours at headquarters, so kind of bounced around a little bit within the agency.
You're well known in all the hubs of NASA.
In one way or another, yes.
In one way or the other. You so you made Seek follow you, as not he didn't make him, but he followed you your footsteps as the director of shuttle management. And I mean, I can't emphasize what a job that must be. Just managing the whole thing. Jim Harrington succeeded Seek as the launch director. And interestingly, Mike McCulley was at USA, United Space Alliance, at that time, and was Seek's counterpart.
Well,
and we, of course, interviewed astronaut McCulley last Thursday.
Mike had come down earlier while I was still down on the 2nd floor, and had gone to work for Lockheed before the USA.
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
Thing,
yes,
and he went to his boss was a guy named Dan Patterson who had come to the contract from the F-117 program out in Palmdale. He had been building stealth fighters before he came in. So Dan and I were kind of together learning space from the Kennedy point of view, and Mike came in, and he and Seek sort of worked together to work with the ground processing operation stuff, and it made for a good smooth working relationship.
Leadership's so important to the American space program and to,
Well, I mean,
most of these people are involved with our museum
Yeah, you
and,
can't get it done without the contractor.
Right.
And the support of the contractor. So one of the major responsibilities of the government person is to ensure that they have a good relationship with the contractor and that the two of them form a team to go get stuff done. Now, I think that people will tell you that we had a good, solid relationship between the shuttle civil service people and the Lockheed processing people and the orbiter, the proper.
yeah. We're talking about the 1990s, the meat of when after the Challenger accident, the shuttle become the workhorse in a way it was intended to, putting things up, a lot of science missions.
So-
You saw 16 shuttle missions as the KSC director. And I was going to show, this is something that, show this, Marty, there. That's one of your missions there that was under your tutelage, STS, what is that? That's, 63, yes, STS 63 there. And a little memento that the crew brought back to you, a space-flown patch. And Eileen Collins was the pilot on that, was it Weatherby was the
Yeah, I think so.
the commander?
Yeah.
And this is the type of things that Jay has donated to the American Space Museum to put in our auctions. They obviously get a lot of these things, but what a cool collage, space-flown patch to Jay Honeycutt. Thanks for your support for STS 63 there. And that was an early shuttle mission. That was a Mir mission. No, that was a shuttle mission, yes.
Well, I think shuttle went to.
I mean, that went to the station,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, that was one of the early stations there. So we wanted to show that and thank him for some of these things we use in our museum and others we will put in the auction to support us there. The other, let's see, what else do we want to talk about before we get into some of the fun stuff there? Looking back, can you believe it? 40 years, April 12th coming up is going to be 40 years since STS-1, one of the boldest test flights in the history of flight probably, with John Young and Bob Crippen flying a spaceship that had never been flown unmanned before. 40 years we're gonna be celebrating that, Jay. And as you look back, well, what do you think about the program in general?
Oh, Shuttle was a incredible program. I mean, when you think of the complexity of it, I mean, at a time there were about the middle part of my time down on the second floor. It took 1 million labor hours to execute 1 million procedural steps to get a shuttle from stopped on the runway on the previous flight to lifting off.
Oh, you're talking about from wheels stop to the next launch. You're talking
launch.
1 million procedures and everything.
1 million procedural steps and 1 million labor hours. Now we ate into some of that with efficiencies but I think the best we ever did was down around 500,000 or 600,000 labor hours, and probably a few more than that procedural steps that had to be done. So it was incredibly complex. It was incredibly labor intensive, but it was an incredible performer. And the best shuttle we ever flew, from terms of in-flight, anything going wrong at all, was the very last one.
Yeah, 135 Atlantis.
Yeah. Now, one of your, I can't remember whether it was Mike's thing or Joanne's, you had a discussion about the numbering system.
Yes, we did. We talked with, about the, like, 51D.
Yeah, well, that was done by the administrator, Jim Biggs, when he was the administrator, was one of these guys that was suspicious about the number 13. So after we got through 12, Mr. Biggs may have come up with a different numbering system so there wouldn't be a STS 13, and stuck with that until Challenger, when he came out of Challenger, then he was gone, so we went back to, we went back to
Oh, it's
the
Biggs
straight
that did
number.
that, because when you see like 51-D, the 5 means it was the 1985 fiscal year, which goes from October to
Yeah.
October. So you could have a launch in November that has a 5 on it, or December that has a 5 on it. And then the 1, of course, was for Kennedy, because we're going to launch
Yeah.
from Vandenberg, and that'd have been 2. And then the D was kind of the A, B, C, D
Yeah,
number.
and, and
How did you guys keep
and
track of that? I mean,
We didn't.
You didn't?
That was the problem, but you couldn't get rid of it as long as Mr. Biggs wasn't there. But I mean, it's a little bit like the what we call it, the worm, that logo.
Yes, the logo, the
Yeah.
meatball versus
Yeah.
the worm, and
Yeah.
you're wearing the meatball
Yeah.
today, so
And,
that's the logo.
So Golden decides that we're going to get rid of the Biggs had decided we're going to have the worm, so you had to go put the worm on all the tails of all the
1975, I
airplanes.
believe.
So all the, no, it was later that he came in with, it was after STS-1.
Okay, all right, yeah.
So you had to put on the tail, vertical tail, of all the airplanes, you had to put everywhere there was a NASA thing, on the VAB, you had to put that cotton picking worm there. So Golden says, well, we're gonna get rid of the worm and go back to the meatball. So he would come down for a visit, and one of the main things he'd make me do is we'd have to ride around the center, and there's one, he'd see a worm somewhere on some building back in the corner, and if you go to the headquarters building, there's some hedges right there, when you go into the headquarters building, that first road where the CIF used to be over here, there were some hedges there, and the hedge guy had grown the hedges in the shape of the worm. Well, the hardest job on the center was to convert that thing back to the meatball, so we had to put up with Golden and his vendetta against the worm, amongst other things.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, there was always a debate in social media when Elon Musk put the worm on the Crew Dragon Falcon 9. Did you like that or not? Just
He's doing a lot of things different. I mean, he's got different looking spacesuits.
yeah,
He's got different
marketing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're doing a great job. I'm not being negative. I mean,
Right, yeah.
They're doing an excellent.
Yeah, there's some
job.
flair to the
Yeah,
SpaceX.
yeah,
Yes,
right.
there.
So
Well, nothing wrong with that. People kind of like fun to see it come back, and people start picking and arguing about it again. So, well, we're having a good time here with Jay Honeycutt. And
I was going to mention one other thing.
yeah, I wanted you to kind of conclude your career there.
When I was out in Houston, one of the opportunities I got was to Chris Kraft by then had moved up to be the center director, and he had a program. George Abbey was his I guess you would call him aide de camp or his staff director, chief of staff maybe.
Mhm.
And so Kraft would have George pick people to come up and serve with him in like an internship, so that he would get that person would be exposed to all Kraft's meetings and his decision process and all that. So you got to watch how senior management did from a guy down in the ranks. I was a branch chief when they pulled me up there. Dick Truly was one that did it before I did. Carolyn Huntoon, who was later a director out there, did it one time, and some other people. So it was a really great job to go to pull somebody out of the ranks and get a chance to see how upper management functioned, and it sort of generated one of my management theorems that you know, the view through the knothole depends on which side of the fence you're standing on. So somebody in Washington may decide to do something, and you, Mr. Worker Bee, you may think that that's really not a smart thing to do, and the reason is because you don't have all the data that person over there does, and you're standing on that side of the fence, you see this, he's standing on this side of the fence, you know, he sees that. So it's important to recognize that people who are in the decision making loop got more data than people who aren't, and they use that to drive their decisions, whether they are popular or not necessarily. So it was an incredibly valuable experience for me. So when I got down here, I thought, well, I'm going to do that on a smaller scale. I'm going to do that within my organization. So I started bringing young people up from the ranks of various operations and let them spend 6 months to 8 months to a year, however long Ed Weber thought it was appropriate for them to be up there, and let them follow me around. They went to all my meetings and went to all the trips that I went on. The only thing they didn't do was personnel related things or trips where I had to go up to get counsel by the general or something,
right?
Thing like that. So
great philosophy.
So out of that group came Dave King, who ended up as a center director at Marshall. Bill Parsons, who ended up being center director here as well as at Stennis and as deputy out at Marshall. Johnny Hickenbottom, who got into the astronaut office. Jennifer Coons, who's now the director of SR&QA, Senator Josie Burnett, that's an engineer in the Skunk Works. All those people had a turn with
well, that's a mentoring program that you created there to make sure the right people had the right knowledge through the same knothole, right? That you were looking through.
Followed me. I mean, Bob has, I started calling him Bubba for a long story that started back in Houston, but everybody, including Bob, have maintained that practice here.
You're saying Cabana?
Yeah.
Okay, Bob Cabana, the current director. And, so that everybody's looking through your side of the knothole, so to speak?
And I'm pretty proud of it.
I would be, yeah. That sounds like a great legacy for you there.
So doing that and being in the batter's box, I guess, when USA was formed was, that's the biggest deal I had on the fourth floor.
USA was formed out of which companies? Tell our guests there.
Martin and at that time Rockwell, or later to be Boeing, formed a joint venture. And rather than competing head to head against the stuff, NASA headquarters and JSC primarily decided that, well, you guys just get together and run all the operations for Shuttle and Station down at Kennedy, up at Marshall, and up at Johnson. And that's when my Mike McCullough went over to be
United Space
United
Alliance.
United Space Alliance. So, that was not without, was not, as they say, fraught with peril, because there were those who thought it was a great idea. There were those who didn't think it was such a hot idea. So I fortunately at that time, George Abbey was the director out at Johnson, and he and I always worked really well together. So it was
fascinating legacy you put there in place with the mentoring and your contribution. One thing I did want our guests to know that I picked up reading about you, in the 1980, you were part of the astronaut selection committee, and you said you read 7,000 astronaut applications and then interviewed 220 prospects.
Yeah.
Was that McCulley's group, the 1980
No, they were.
Maggots?
They came in. George Abbey was.
Tell us about that. Yeah.
George Abbey was the director of flight operations at that time. It was decided that Shuttle was coming on board, 1977. Shuttle's coming on board. We need some more astronauts because the last ones had been picked several years before, so we needed fresh supply of astronauts. So George put together a selection board, and I was on it, and I was also the staff director, I guess is a good term. So we got 7,000 applications, and George and I, and George too, we personally read every one of them to ensure that they not only that there's a basic set of criteria, but it was pretty basic. Just if you were a pilot, you had to have a certain number of hours. You had to be a test pilot school graduate, and if you were, we invented a new category called mission specialists, which allowed us to bring in scientists and engineers who flight engineer types, and so we got about 2/3, 1/3 of mission specialist candidates and pilot candidates. So we went through and shredded out the ones that we thought would be the most competitive in the process, and then we got that down to I think 220, and then we interviewed a series of interviews with the entire board, which John Young was on the board, and so then we winnowed that down to 35 that came in the 1978 group. We did the same thing again in 1980.
Well, there's the 35 new guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did
right.
the same thing again in 1980, and then I went off for an assignment at headquarters and didn't get in. And I think Mike came in the 82 or 84 classes. I forget.
That sounds like a lot of coffee and donuts and a lot of meetings sitting around there.
Well, yeah. But it was interesting because after a while you got, we got Army guys, we got Navy guys, we got Marines, and they fit patterns. You got to the point where after 15 minutes, you close your eyes and you didn't know anything about a guy's qualifications. Just listening to him and talking to him, you could figure out what branch of the service he was in with about a 90% accuracy. And then you would find the scientists would come in, and you had to separate those that were true scientists, and the only interest in life was to sit over in the corner with their little research project, and were not. It was important that you be judged to fit into a team, because the shuttle crews was all a team environment, and you had to demonstrate that you could function and wanted to function in a team. And then with some of these scientists, you had to determine whether they had they ever done anything that put them at risk personally in any way? Did they fly a plane? Did they skydive? Did they deep dive? Did they race motorcycle? I mean, did they do anything other than sit at a lab bench and stare at a computer? Because you pretty well knew that there was. I mean, the good news was it was almost impossible to mess it up because I mean, we picked 35. There were 135 that were qualified. So the margin of error, of differences were really small. Just so in a sense, you almost couldn't make a bad choice. I mean, it turns out, some of them turned out a little shaky later, but there was no way to determine that in the first place. But,
what an interesting.
Yeah, but it was. That's the reason you asked me if I worked on ALT, and the reason I didn't work ALT was because we were doing that. We'd go out to Edwards to watch the flights. And one reason, because a lot of the pilot candidates that we were interviewing or were to interview were out at Edwards in the flight test school, so we could go out there and kind of meet them.
For the approach and landing tests in 1977 that were so important to the program. In there. Well, that's great. We've been talking a little bit with Jay Honeycutt here, former Kennedy Space Center director, and Marty, have we got any questions that people directed towards us?
There are a couple of questions, but I can't find them because there's been about 100 comments.
Is that all?
Yeah, a lot of your family members, Jay, and a lot of people from KSC days, and probably some from JSC that I didn't recognize. But we did get a comment from Bob Seek and Lisa Stott.
Well, you'll have fun looking back on that. Well, thank you, Marty. What we're going to do now, Jay brought like a little scrapbook of pictures here of some of the highlights and fun lights, if you will, at Kennedy Space Center. And I'm just going to let him, as Marty zooms in on him, show us a little bit about your scrapbook out there.
Well, I'll run through them pretty quick because I guess we're running.
Oh, we got all kinds of time.
These are just some of the fun things. I mean, there's no use being out there if you can't have some fun while you're doing it. But this is a picture. When I was at school at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, I was on the student government, and my roommate was the governor, Edwin Edwards of Louisiana, was his nephew. Mike was his nephew, and John Kennedy was campaigning for the presidency, so they invited some of these guys from the school to go over and meet Kennedy, and I was one of them.
That's you right there.
That's me. Here
wow, what a picture! And what a thrill!
So 35 years later, I got to be, director of the center that carries his.
That is neat. What an awesome picture there. I'll set those aside there, Jay.
And then Dan Patterson, I mentioned earlier, he and I went to a conference up in the Northeast. Can't remember now exactly where it was, but it put on by one of these management schools. And one of the other attendees was Richard Turlake, who was at that time the chairman of Harley Davidson. And so Dan and I and he ended up each evening after the conference thing debriefing the conference down on the first floor of the hotel, and became pretty good friends. So we came back. We're on the way back. We said, well, we ought to get some pictures of our biker guys and send them up to Richard. So we put out a call to the little park that's over there by the headquarters building. One Friday afternoon, Dan put out a call to his people and said, if you got a Harley and you want to make a movie, come by. And so we had a keg of beer, and we talked to him about making a movie. And these are the two ringleaders of their group, Crazy Ralph, aka Ron Heiss, and Pirate Pete, aka Pete Peters. brought about 50 of their guys
And here they
over.
are. right?
So we waited till all the bosses left town. My boss and Dan's boss left town, and we got all the bikes out on the pad with the RSS rolled back. And you probably can't see it, but this is Crazy Ralph here with the flag on his bike. I think we had 50 bikes that rode around the pad and then went out and rode around the center. And then we interviewed each one of these guys and asked them to compare riding a Harley with working on the space shuttle.
Oh,
And we got some remarkable things, and so we made a little movie, and we got a hold of the people that had made the Peter Fonda motorcycle movie,
Easy Rider.
Easy Rider,
Uh-huh.
and the Born to Ride song that's in there. We got
Yeah.
Born to
Born to be Wild, Steppenwolf. Yeah.
And so we got permission to use it on the background to our little movie. And then we took the movie up to York to Turlink's senior staff meeting at Harley-Davidson,
Oh, really?
and showed it to him. And then we that's when Rossmeyer had his shop there on the main drag in Daytona Beach, his Harley shop. And we gave him a copy of it. He played it in the shop for several years.
Probably on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah, well, I'll give you guys a copy.
Love it.
It's actually
We'll post it on.
it's actually
our
pretty
Facebook.
good. I mean,
Cool.
for a bunch of amateurs.
Yeah. And what bird was on the pad there? Do you remember?
I
What?
can't remember. I don't
Okay.
remember.
As he saw so many of them.
Yeah, and then
They do have USA on there. I understand they didn't
Yeah.
want that USA on there after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then later on, we met. I met Dick Octella that had the Harley shop down on US 1 down by the Pineda down there, and he ever once a year would sponsor a bike rally thing in Cocoa Beach. So I gave them, when I was director, I gave them permission to bring their bikes on the center and do a ride around the center and around the things. And we ended up on the 15,000-foot runway, nose to tail, with 9,000 feet of Harley-Davidson.
Is that right? Wow. And boy, you know, people are still
Yeah.
talking about that to
Yeah.
this day, Jay. Haven't done that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah, it was cool. It was very cool.
That's
And
fun.
and then I was telling Karen this morning, this fella is,
Get that.
his name is Doug Steffen. He has a radio talk show guy, and he's actually on WMEL down in Melbourne on lines. It's called the Doug Gin somebody show,
Magellan the Bear there.
and so he would come out to the center and do his show for launches. And one day he brought this lady who's was a school teacher up in Evergreen, Colorado, which is right over that big hill outside of Denver. And she was a geography teacher, world geography teacher in Evergreen, and her kids weren't getting the message. So she came up with the idea to get this little
Teddy bear
dressed up in a flight suit. And
There's the bear
Yeah.
that pulled off the internet there,
and
the
she-
Magellan
and
bear.
she brought him down. One of the times Doug came to do his show, she brought him down and sat him up in the bleachers there at the press site, and we did the show. And then I got the idea that, well, let's go. I mean, the bear had already done a lap at Indianapolis with Paul Newman and slept in the Lincoln bedroom.
Really?
And I said, well, because what she did, she had a friend that was a United Airlines flight attendant, and the lady flew internationally, so she would take postcards from the bear at these various Madrid and Berlin and wherever, and mail them from there and say, today, here's where I am, and Penny would use that as a lesson plan
For the
for
kids.
the kids.
Oh.
So I said, well, Will, I said, we fly this thing. So
On
I
the
went
space shuttle.
on the space shuttle. So I went to the program office, standard answer, well, if we do it for that, we gotta do it for everybody that wants to do it now. I said, well, so,
Yeah.
but anyway, no, that's disapproved. So I went above them to the director of shuttle stuff up at headquarters, Jed Pearson. I said, we need to knock that stuff off, he said. So I went above him, and this is Mike Mott, who was the chief of staff for Golden. Well, it turns out Mike's wife was a school teacher. He said, that's the best idea that I know of. So they put him, we got him manifested on STS 63, I believe it was, and so in a locker, and then Jeff Hoffman, on orbit, Jeff Hoffman took him out and did a little presentation.
Weightless thing with him there.
With him, and
Awesome.
brought him back. And today this bear is in the Smithsonian.
This bear, right here, the Magellan bear, they call it, 'cause after the explorer, I gather, because it went
Right.
all around.
He's
And,
in there in Space Museum.
Wow, that's so cool. What else have you got there, Jay?
This is up, I used to go play fireman and
This is a very hands-on on the director and manager. You weren't afraid to get in there with your people and do whatever they did, right?
the fire chief, turned out to be my buddy. I'll show you one a little later that sort of infringed on that relationship. But anyway, I'd go play fireman. I also would go to the range with the.
Are you in that picture?
Yeah, right here.
Oh, wow, yeah, it looks like
Yeah.
you're ready to fight a fire.
I also go out to the range with the security guys and shoot their little AK-47s. And I don't have a picture of that, but I used to keep my target up behind the door in my office, and people would come in and start to give me a hard time, and open up the door and show them.
Okay, show your gun.
You don't want to give me any.
Right. All right.
Then here's where the Olympic torch in '96, the Olympic torch came through the center. Here's Dave Weldon, who was our congressman at that time, Dan Golden, and Rick Abramson, who was originally the original manager of the Delaware North team here at the center. And the torch was actually carried around the country by a group of Georgia Highway Patrol young guys, and they would take it to various places. So they came out to the center, and Peggy and I used to have a little party before the launches, and so I invited those guys to bring to come to the party, and they could bring the torch. So we got to, people got to actually see the torch.
Marty Winkle here lit the torch at
Did you?
KSC.
Cool, yeah.
In there.
Yeah, well, that Georgia State Patrolman, I can't remember his name now, was Tripp or something like that, was a really, really cool young guy.
That's not, yeah, that was in 1996, of
yeah.
course.
And then I was given,
This is about NASA. I'm going to show this, Jay.
yeah.
NASA and NASCAR.
Yeah. When the guys would come to either in the first of the year when they'd come down to practice, or in July when they'd come to Daytona to the race, they'd always want to, a lot of them would come down and want to have get a tour of the center. So Bobby Allison, the legendary Bobby Allison,
Wonderful man.
came down, and I gave him a tour, and we went in the thermal protection system shop there by OPF 1 and 2, and I was showing him the thermal blankets and all that sort of stuff, and explaining to him, how they were used to protect the heat on the orbiter and all that. He said, well, could we use these things in our race cars, because the race cars had like 800 horsepower engines and dual exhaust in both pipes, of which came out right under their seats, and their seats are made like this, and they had those fire retardant suits on, so they'd sweat And then the sweat would boil, and they were pretty uncomfortable by the end of a 400 or 500 mile
Oh, man, yes.
race. And same way with their heel, because they never lift their foot off. I mean, they lift their foot off the accelerator, but they don't raise it up. They brake with their left foot, so the bottoms of their heels were. And so Bobby said, "Could we use this?" And I said, "Well, I think so." So he said, "Come up to Daytona and we'll see what we can find somebody who wants to do it." So I go up there, and this friend of mine, Butch Stevens, he was a spare parts provider for the race team. So we went to talk to Butch and asked him if he'd market it, if he could make it. He said he would. So we came back, and Lee saw it, and I and Butch and these guys signed a technology transfer agreement where we actually, through Lee, we transferred the thermal protection system technology to. It turns out Bobby couldn't get it done, but Roger Penske and Rusty Wallace, when Rusty was
There's
driving
Rusty
for
there.
him, and said, Penske said he would use it, and so anyway, Butch started marketing he started manufacturing and marketing the material and selling it to race teams, and they're still using them.
Yeah, they've got a heel that they put on their
they're
thing
still
on there,
using
and
it,
we talked
together.
before we went live that I was a track photographer at Bristol Motor Speedway, and you said you did a test there. Drove around the salad bowl.
Well, when I retired out here, Butch bought me a
Petty ride or something with a petty
ride.
Yeah.
Up at
Yeah.
so I get in the thing, and I drive my fanny off, and I come back, and I think I made 80 miles an hour with top speed. The next day, Rusty qualified at 125. So that's when it dawned on me that.
Well, it made me so dizzy
Yeah.
going around with a guy at 100 some miles an
Yeah.
hour. Their endurance is amazing, and but NASCAR and NASA did work together on with their thermal protection system
And
on
I
there.
thought I had a picture, but I guess there was one more Harley story.
Yeah.
When I retired, I did the retirement ceremony they did the retirement ceremony at the Saturn V. So, there's a bunch of people there, and I'm up on the thing, and they're giving the speeches, and Crazy Ralph jumps up and starts, and I thought, what's he, this cannot be good. He starts making a speech, and pretty soon I heard a motorcycle crank up. And comes to find out, she had nefariously worked with Octella to get me a Harley Davidson for my retirement party. So Fire Pete drove it up down the middle up right under the Saturn V down to where the thing.
Is that right?
And I thought the fire marshal was going to have a heart attack. It's got to be the only.
Harley driven up and down the Saturn V rocket at the
but Peggy had
building
worked
over there.
She had worked really hard to get it done, and because I had absolutely no clue there was
his
coming.
wife Peggy, and she's off camera here with her husband. Well, this has been so fascinating. I wanted to show you this picture here, our fans out there. Such a hands-on guy, like most of these great leaders in our NASA program are. This is about 3 in the morning, Jay, in 1996, January 20th, 1996, and you're underneath Endeavor's wings, and looks like the front wheel there. There you are right there. Second from the left, Winston Scott's beside you there. This was STS-72 that landed there. And you're out there in the middle of the night to make sure your crew's safe after a shuttle landing. Yeah, so. Well, I'll tell one story that I heard in the among our hallowed halls here at the American Space Museum from Dan McCune, who was a crane operator to VAB. Dan said, Jay, that one afternoon he's out there outside the VAB, and he sees a couple bass boats in the channel that leads to the turn basin. Now there's some waterways out there to bring in some of the big pieces on a barge, and he sees two bass fishermen out there, and you're told as a NASA employee to be aware of strange looking things going on and report it. And Dan said he went over to one of the boats, a guy fishing there, and said, hey, you guys really think you should be fishing out here in the turn basin? And the guy in the bass boat said to Dan, well, why don't you ask your boss, Jay Honeycutt, over there in the other boat? So immediately a couple KSC policemen showed up around Dan, and Dan says, yeah, I know what's going on. That's Honeycutt and his friends fishing out there. And the KSC policeman said, I don't see anybody fishing out there. Do you see anybody fishing out there? And Dan said, no, sir, I don't see anybody fishing out there.
Yeah, I had met a named Shaw Grigsby. He's a professional fisherman from Gainesville.
Uh-huh.
And he had a show. He had a fishing show in those days. And so I let him come on site to fish and film film the show, film his show.
Oh,
fishing.
neat.
So I mean, he was like in hog heaven because
Oh,
nobody had been fishing out there but the security guys.
Yeah.
A bunch of other guys on third shift that shall remain nameless. So you'll find it somewhere out here. We got a picture that he used on his show of the orbiter is on the pad with the RSS rollback, and that's when the three replica Christopher Columbus ships came down here.
Yes, the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria,
and
yes.
So the pad's over here, and those three ships are lined up over here, and then we're back here, and they got a shot of over those ships of the pads.
Oh, wow.
Really cool.
Yeah, that was a famous
It's around
thing.
here somewhere.
That was during your tenure out there.
Yeah, I was in the boat.
That's
when we
pretty
took
neat.
the picture.
We got one question, Jay, from Joyce Abbey, asking about the chili cook-off.
Oh, Lord. But Joyce is one of George's children, and we did lots of, George was a big chili cook-off guy. We did lots of, out there in Houston, we did lots of chili cook-offs and then lots of fun. So we got down here, thought, well, we'd try it too, and so we used, McCulley was always a good judge, and we get some other guys, and I got some pictures of me around here sitting on the dunk tank.
Did they have beans in that chili?
No beans in chili.
No beans in the
No.
chili. Okay.
Texas beans don't have chili in them.
Well, a lot of fun. We've had a lot of fun talking to you, Jay. You're a great leader and a good commonsensical guy, I can tell. Is there anything that you'd like to share with all your friends out there and family that have been watching this?
Well, they're probably hungry now. So appreciate all the people that watched, and hopefully they didn't go to sleep during this thing.
Well, I thank you very much. What do you think of our museum here?
It's great. Yeah, no, I enjoy coming over here. Hopefully, I don't know if you heard, but I told Karen, Doug Steffen that we looked at earlier. I was on his radio show this morning.
Yes.
And I spent a half an hour on the show talking about this place and what
Well,
you
bless
guys
you.
are.
Thank you.
What you guys are doing, and I don't know what his. I don't know how many people listen to him, but there's a goodly number that do. So, and he's on WMEL down there, AM station down in Melbourne.
Okay. What was it called? What is on the dial? You remember?
Yeah, I don't know what it is on the dial, but it's in the AM. He's on something called WMEL online. But hopefully some of those people, because I told them you're going to be opening up in a week or so.
Yes.
And, so hopefully some people heard that and they'll
Great.
show up out here.
But We've had a tremendous time talking to you. We don't care how long it was. Tell your friends to go back and look at this. Jay Honeycutt, you've been really enhanced the knowledge of a lot of people out there, and they can see what one of NASA's great managers and leaders is all about. We wish you so much good health in your retirement with your wife here, and we're glad for all of you that have watched us today. Marty, any final thoughts?
No, it's just too many comments.
Too many comments. Well, we'll be happy to read those later.
Yeah.
And Jay Honeycutt, we can't thank you enough for helping our audience stay curious.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good luck with this. It's a great program, and hopefully you'll. A suggestion: get some of the text.
Get some more techs in here.
The guys are hands-on guys. They're out on the pad or.
We're going to do that. We're going to. Marty Winkle's got some connections there, but you can help us get some of them there. So, until tomorrow, Friday, when we'll have a show more about our auction. Jay Honeycutt's here with me, helping you stay curious. I'm Mark Marquette, and we're glad you are with us today to bridge the space between us. Thank you.